World War II, it was the largest and deadliest conflict in the history of humankind, a total catastrophe that literally reshaped the world we live in today. So in the next few minutes, we're going to break down the essential pieces of this devastating war, from the political blunders that lit the fuse to the terrifying new technologies that defined it and the brand new world it left behind. Let's just start with a number that's almost impossible to really wrap your head around. 80 million. That's the estimated number of people, soldiers and civilians, who died. Just try to picture that for a second. That staggering figure is the backdrop for every single thing we're about to talk about. So, how did it all begin? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was more like a cascade of political failures, unchecked aggression, and this desperate hope to avoid another great war, which, ironically, is what made this one absolutely inevitable. I mean, this timeline just shows you how quickly everything spiraled out of control. European powers were so haunted by World War I, they tried this policy of appeasement, basically giving Hitler what he wanted to avoid a fight. They even handed over parts of Czechoslovakia in 1938. But of course, Hitler's promises meant nothing. After Italy jumped in and Germany and Italy signed their Pact of Steel, the final straw came on September 1st, 1939. When Germany invaded Poland, that was the red line. Britain and France had no choice but to declare war. And just like that, the world was divided. You had two major teams. On one side, the Axis powers, with Germany, Italy, and Japan as the main players. And on the other, the Allied powers, led at first by the UK and France, along with the Commonwealth nations and, of course, the invaded Poland. Those were the lines drawn in the sand as the world plunged into darkness. So, what did this war actually look like on the ground? Well, it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. World War II wasn't just bigger, it unleashed revolutionary and frankly terrifying new ways of fighting that completely changed the definition of a battlefield. At the core of Germany's early success was this idea: Blitzkrieg, lightning war. It was the brutal answer to the miserable trench warfare of World War I. Instead of getting bogged down for years, the goal was pure psychological shock. Just imagine this: dive bombers, tanks, and infantry all hitting you at the exact same time, with incredible speed. It was designed to cause chaos and collapse before an enemy could even figure out what was happening. That's how Germany just rolled over countries like Poland and France. And a massive part of that strategy was air power. For the first time in history, controlling the skies became absolutely essential to winning on the ground. This was proven in the Battle of Britain. Britain's Royal Air Force fought heroically against the German Luftwaffe, and by winning the air war, they stopped a land invasion cold. It showed that air power alone could decide the fate of a nation. And this right here, this quote illustrates perfectly just how vital that air power became, especially in the massive Pacific theater. The American general, Douglas MacArthur, he learned a brutal lesson in the Philippines. Without control of the sky, your soldiers are sitting ducks. His entire island-hopping strategy was built around one question: how far can my planes fly? The very first thing they did after taking an island? Build an airfield for the next attack. Now, despite the Axis's incredible early victories, this war was far from over. A series of massive, crucial battles and some huge strategic mistakes started to shift the momentum, creating these pivotal moments that would eventually, finally lead to an Allied victory. You can really see these turning points across three key areas. On the Eastern Front, Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union, what a colossal mistake. It opened up this enormous, brutal front that just bled Germany's resources dry. Out in the Pacific, the Battle of Midway in 1942 was the game changer. It was a huge naval victory for the US that crippled Japan's fleet. And in the West, of course, the D-Day landings in 1944 finally opened the door to liberating France. And to really get a sense of the scale of D-Day, just look at this number: 6,939. That is how many ships were involved in the invasion of Normandy. It is still, to this day, the largest seaborne invasion in all of human history, an absolutely monumental achievement. But victory, especially in the Pacific, came at a truly staggering cost. These casualty numbers from the fight to retake the Philippines, they tell a grim story. You can see the brutal reality of fighting an enemy whose soldiers were taught to fight to the very last man. Every single island was an incredibly bloody battle. And as horrific as these military losses were, they were just one part of the war's true cost. The horror of this war went so far beyond the soldiers. In fact, it was civilians who really bore the brunt of the suffering. The atrocities committed during this time, they represent some of the absolute darkest chapters in our history. The most infamous, of course, was the Holocaust. What's so chilling is that this wasn't just random violence. It was a state-sponsored genocide, carried out with cold, bureaucratic efficiency. It started with laws that stripped Jewish people of their rights and their property. They even set up a fake bank account with a fake name, Max Heiliger, to launder all the stolen wealth. Then it escalated to forcing people into these horrific, overcrowded ghettos. And finally, it culminated in the final solution: systematic mass murder at extermination camps like Auschwitz. And while the Holocaust stands as a unique and singular evil, the scale of civilian death was tragically global. An estimated 15 million civilians died in China. The Soviet Union lost around 13 million civilians. Poland lost millions of non-Jewish citizens as well. The suffering of this war, it truly touched every single corner of the globe. This unbelievable human cost is what ultimately led to the creation of a weapon that was completely unprecedented. In his surrender broadcast to the people of Japan, Emperor Hirohito didn't talk about losing battles. He talked about a new and most cruel bomb, a weapon whose power to cause damage was, in his own words, incalculable. That bomb didn't just end the war. It fundamentally and irrevocably changed the world. A completely new global order rose from the ashes, and it was defined by this new weapon and the new power dynamics it created. The weapon Hirohito was talking about was, of course, the result of the Manhattan Project. This was a top-secret Allied program, basically a frantic race against time. It was fueled by the terrifying fear that Nazi Germany might build an atomic bomb first. Scientists like Robert Oppenheimer were given the incredible task of harnessing the power of the atom itself. So when the dust finally settled, the world was reshaped in three fundamental ways. First, the United Nations was created, built on the hope that we could prevent a catastrophe like this from ever happening again. Second, the world entered the atomic age, and we now live under the shadow of nuclear weapons. And third, that wartime alliance between the US and the Soviet Union, it's shattered, kicking off the decades-long standoff we now know as the Cold War. You know, from the failure of appeasement all the way to the dawn of the nuclear age, the Second World War holds these profound and often incredibly painful lessons. As we look around at the world that was built from its ashes, the big question is still there. Which of those lessons have we really truly learned, and which ones must we constantly fight to remember?